You're suffering more than you need to. It's a heavy thing to hear, maybe even a little frustrating, especially on the days when, on paper, everything is actually fine. You have the coffee, the schedule is moving, the world around you is relatively quiet. And yet, there's that hum, a low-grade vibration of tension in your chest, or a restless loop in your mind that refuses to let you just be. We've been taught to call this stress or modern life. We assume that if we feel stuck, it's because we haven't worked hard enough or solved the right problems yet. But I've started to realize that the friction usually isn't coming from our lives. It's coming from the very thing that's trying to protect us. It's as if there's a part of us, the ego, that doesn't know the war is over. It's still patrolling the borders, still looking for threats, still holding on to old defenses like they're oxygen. It isn't a flaw in your character. It's a survival mechanism that's simply overworked. I'm not here to give you a how-to guide on fixing your personality. I'm just someone who noticed that my own internal protector was the very thing making me miserable. So, I'd like to explore this with you, slowly. We're going to look at 5 specific ways we grip onto reality that keep us in this state of unnecessary suffering. I invite you to just sit with these. Don't try to fix them. Just see if you recognize yourself in the mirror we're about to hold up. Because sometimes, the moment you realize you're holding a hot coal, you don't need a strategy to let it go. You just do. It starts with a simple evolutionary misunderstanding. Biologically, your brain is a survival organ. It's a don't-get-eaten machine. It's not particularly interested in whether you're fulfilled or if you feel a sense of cosmic oneness while eating your lunch. Its primary directive is much humbler. Keep this body alive until tomorrow. For thousands of years, that was a full-time job. Threat was everywhere. But in the modern world, for most of us, those physical threats have vanished. We aren't being hunted. We have roofs over our heads. Yet, the system hasn't updated its software. This is the biological root of that hum I mentioned earlier. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, can't actually tell the difference between a predator in the bushes and a passive-aggressive email from your boss. It treats a social rejection or the fear of looking stupid with the same chemical urgency as a physical attack. It floods your system with cortisol. It tightens your shoulders. It readies the defense. We call this stress, but really, it's overprotection. Think of the ego like a suit of armor. At some point in your life, maybe when you were a child or after a particularly bad breakup, you realized that the world could be cold. So, you put on the armor. It kept you safe. It helped you navigate the world without getting hurt. But the problem with armor is that after a while, you forget you're wearing it. It becomes your skin. And eventually, the very weight of the metal that once saved your life is the thing that's now making it impossible to breathe. We stay in a state of high alert because the ego is terrified that if it stops guarding the gates for even a second, something catastrophic will happen. It's a survival mechanism that has outlived the danger. When you feel that unexplained tension, it's often just the protector inside you doing its job in an empty room. It's looking for ghosts. It's guarding a border that no one is trying to cross, and the cost of that constant vigilance is a quiet, persistent exhaustion. But this leads to a specific question. If we're safe, what exactly is the ego so busy defending? Usually, it's not our physical body. It's something much more fragile. It's our need to be right. It's a strange thing to notice, but for the ego, being wrong feels like a small death. Think about the last time you were in a minor disagreement. Maybe it was about a trivial fact, or a misunderstanding with a partner, or even just an internal argument you were having with a stranger's post online. Notice the physical sensation that arises when someone challenges you. Your heart rate climbs, your throat tightens. There's a sudden sharp surge of energy, an urgent need to correct, to clarify, to win the point. In those moments, we aren't actually defending the truth. We're defending our identity. You see, the ego builds itself out of certainties. It tells a story that says, I am the person who knows things, or I am the person who is never taken advantage of. When that certainty is threatened, the ego doesn't see it as a chance to learn. It sees it as a crack in the foundation of who you are. This is why we replay conversations in the shower hours after they've ended, perfecting the comeback we should have said. We are trying to repair the self-image that was bruised. We spend an incredible amount of emotional currency trying to be right, but if you look closely, you'll notice that winning an argument rarely brings peace. It only brings a temporary, hollow validation. The tension remains because the protector is still on high alert, waiting for the next challenge. We treat our opinions as if they are our limbs. If someone disagrees with us, it feels like they are trying to amputate a part of our being. But what if your opinions are just thoughts? What if being wrong didn't mean you were failing, but simply that you were updating your map of the world? The suffering here comes from the grip. We hold our position so tightly that our hands begin to cramp. We think that by being right, we are making ourselves safe, but all we're really doing is building a cage of correctness that we then have to defend day and night. When you drop the need to be right, you don't lose your intelligence. You just lose the exhaustion of being the world's judge. But even if we let go of the need to be right, there's another attachment that's often even harder to see, because it's the one that's looking back at us from the mirror. It's the constant, subtle pressure of being seen. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from living on an invisible stage. If you're like most people, you probably spend a significant portion of your day managing how you appear to the world. And I don't just mean checking your hair in the mirror. I mean the subtle, constant internal calibration of your personality. Am I coming across as competent? Do they think I'm lazy? Was that joke too much? We've created a society where we are perpetually on. But the real suffering doesn't come from the cameras or the social media feeds. It comes from the internalized audience. Neurologically, our brains have a specific circuit for self-referential processing. It's the part of us that evaluates our actions through the eyes of others. This was a vital survival tool when being cast out of the tribe meant certain death. But today, we've taken that survival tool and turned it into a 24/7 surveillance state. We don't just live our lives anymore, we curate them. We are simultaneously the actor, the director, and the critic. Even when we're alone, many of us feel a strange pressure to be something. We can't just sit on the porch and watch the rain. We have to be the kind of person who appreciates the rain. We've turned our very existence into a performance for a jury that isn't actually there. This creates a low-grade, constant anxiety. Because if your value is dependent on being seen in a certain way, then your peace of mind is always at the mercy of someone else's perception. You're forever waiting for a like, a nod, or a word of validation to tell you that it's okay to relax. The attachment here is to relevance. The ego is terrified of being invisible, because to the ego, being invisible feels like not existing at all. But think about the moments when you felt the most at peace. Usually, they are the moments when you completely forgot about yourself, when you were so absorbed in a sunset, or a task, or a conversation that the performer simply went on break. In those moments, you didn't need to be seen to feel whole. The relief isn't in finally being noticed by everyone. The relief is in realizing you don't need to be noticed to exist. But this performance, this need to be seen, is usually serving a much larger project. It's all fuel for the most persistent attachment of all, the story of me. If you look closely at your inner life, you'll find that you aren't just living, you are narrating. The ego is, at its heart, a storyteller. It takes the messy, random, and often contradictory events of your life and weaves them into a cohesive script. It says, I am the one who always gets the short end of the stick, or I am the resilient survivor, or even I am the person who is finally getting their life together. We call this our identity, and we guard it more fiercely than our physical safety. The suffering starts when life refuses to follow the script. When something happens that contradicts the story of me, it doesn't just feel like an event, it feels like an existential threat. If your story is, I'm a successful professional, and you lose your job, you don't just lose an income, you lose yourself. If your story is, I am the one everyone relies on, and you have a breakdown, the shame isn't just about the failure, it's about the collapse of the narrative. Psychologists call this narrative identity theory. We use these stories to create a sense of continuity in a world that is constantly changing. But the problem is that stories are rigid while life is fluid. By attaching ourselves to a fixed story of who we are, we lose the ability to actually be who we are in the present moment. We spend so much energy defending our character that we forget the character isn't real. It's a mental construct made of memories and expectations. Think of it like a movie. You can enjoy the film without believing you are the flickering light on the screen. But the ego has forgotten it's watching a movie. It thinks it's the light. When we experience ego identification, we are constantly checking to see if the current moment fits our character arc. We ask, is this what someone like me should be doing? Does this match my past? Does this lead to the future I've promised myself? This is why we cling to our wounds. Sometimes, we'd rather stay in a story of suffering that we understand than move into a space of freedom that we don't. The story is comfortable. It gives us a place to stand. But what happens if you stop telling the story? What if you allowed yourself to be nothing for a moment, not as a failure, but as a clean slate? When the story of me stops, the pressure to be consistent stops. The need to defend your past disappears. You realize that you aren't the story, you are the space in which the story is being told. However, there is one last grip the ego uses to keep us anchored to the story, a tool it uses to try and prevent the story from ever ending. It's the desperate, exhausting habit of control. We have this deep, almost frantic belief that if we can just figure out why things are happening, we'll finally be safe. We call it finding meaning, but often it's just the ego trying to build a bridge across the abyss of the unknown. The ego hates a vacuum. It cannot stand a moment that doesn't have a label. If you're feeling sad, the ego demands a reason. If a relationship ends, it demands a lesson. If the future is unclear, it demands a plan. This is what psychologists call intolerance of uncertainty. To the ego, an unexplained moment is a dangerous moment. So, we spend our lives in a state of simulative worrying. We rehearse conversations that will never happen. We solve problems that don't exist yet. We dissect the past looking for the mistake that led us here. We think we are being productive. We think we are working on ourselves. But really, we are just trying to exercise control over a reality that is fundamentally uncontrollable. The suffering here isn't caused by the uncertainty itself. It's caused by our resistance to it. Think about how much energy it takes to constantly maintain a why for everything that happens to you. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The moment you let go, it pops to the surface. We are terrified that if we stop explaining life, life will fall apart. But the truth is, life has been happening quite well on its own, long before we started narrating it. When you attach yourself to the need for control, you are essentially telling the universe that it isn't allowed to be what it is. You are demanding that the present moment fit into your tiny human-sized box of what makes sense. But what if you didn't need a reason to be happy, or even a reason to be sad? What if you allowed the clouds to pass without needing to know exactly where they're going or which one is the most important? There is a profound stillness that emerges when you stop trying to solve your life. When you realize that "I don't know" isn't a failure, it's an opening. It's the moment the ego finally sits down and realizes it doesn't have to be the CEO of the universe. This brings us to a quiet realization. If we aren't our stories, and we aren't our defenses, and we don't need to be right or seen or in control, what is actually left? It's easy to walk away from an exploration like this and feel like you have a new list of chores, a new set of attachments to go out and fix. But that would just be the ego finding a new way to stay busy. The truth, the messy, honest truth, is that you don't need to defeat your ego. You don't need to kill the part of you that wants to be right or seen or in control. You just need to let it rest. Imagine that tired sentry who has been patrolling the walls of your life for decades. They aren't your enemy. They're exhausted, and they only stay at their post because they think if they leave, everything will crumble. When you start to notice these 5 attachments in your daily life, don't meet them with judgment. Meet them with a quiet nod of recognition. Say to yourself, there's that armor again. I see it. I'm safe right now. You can sit down for a moment. I'm curious. As we sat with these 5 today, which one felt the loudest to you? Was it the need to be right, the pressure of being seen, or perhaps the story of you? If you're comfortable, I'd love for you to share that in the comments, not as a confession, but just as a way of acknowledging it out loud. Sometimes, just naming the weight makes it easier to set down. Suffering isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you're trying very, very hard. As you move back into your day, I wonder, what would your life look like if you didn't have to carry the story of you quite so heavily? What is left when you stop defending a self that was never actually under attack? Maybe the relief you've been looking for isn't at the end of a long journey. Maybe it's right here, in the space where you finally stop trying. If this exploration felt useful to you, I'd be honored to have you stay with us for the next one. You can subscribe to join the channel, and we'll keep looking into these things together. Thank you for your time and for your attention. I know how much those are worth.